Today I have a bunch of books for you that are the most unique books that I've ever read. And they're unique not in the sense that they're books that have the greatest story or this or that, but they did something special with the art form. They did something special with the idea of writing and what writing can contain. And through this difference in experience, you learn a whole lot about yourself and just what can be done through the written form. So, first thing I have is the book I'm reading right now. I think I'm going to pronounce it wrong. I know I am. Ficciones, I think that's Ficciones. I don't know how to say it. Please educate me in the comments. I don't speak any other languages. That's something I will do at some point. But this is by Jorge Luis Borges. I think that's how you say it. I just know Borges. I didn't know the first two names, but I don't know how to even explain this aside from it's a book written about books that don't exist. And it kind of entrances you in this world, and it makes it seem as if you're in a conversation. It makes it seem as if somebody's explaining their favorite movie to you in the detail of just, oh, this scene did this thing did this, and this did this and this, and like the details and the level of just building that is done about things that don't even exist is so tantalizing. And through this, you kind of just have an appreciation for the entire art form of writing. And I can't recommend it enough. I'm only about halfway through, and it's going to be one of my favorite books I ever read. The next thing is something I actually abandoned, Moby Dick. The reason I just put it down is because I was reading it. I was enjoying parts of it, but I didn't have the heart for it at the time. I didn't have the focus or the patience to delve through it. And, it's something I'm going to revisit at some point because I got about halfway through. I enjoyed some parts of it. Some parts of it were slow, but it's partly because of the style that I put it down. But it really shouldn't make you not want to read it. It's just I didn't have the right level of attention at the time. But we all know the story of Captain Ahab, the white whale, the endless pursuit of, conquering this world and conquering nature and that sort of things, deepness about humanity. But what really strikes you about the book is that pretty much every single chapter is written in a different style. There's not really one voice. It kind of shifts, and it shifts into storytelling from somebody that you don't even know, somebody that's just in the story for a little bit. Then it goes into great detail about the entire industry of whaling, and then it goes back to the story, and then it goes to mythic biblical references, and it's really all over the place. And what it captures is the human experience. It's similar to a book we're going to talk about later on, but it's a book I just didn't appreciate while I was reading it. I'm certainly going to pick it up, but I had to include it because it was like these other books that just kind of defied what I was expecting. The next thing we have is William Blake. I don't think you can put a list together about stylistically trying things out and not put Blake there. Blake is one of the most interesting, one of the most creative people you'll ever study. The man was probably crazy, but it's through his craziness that we see great genius. And, the particular work I'm going to suggest to you by Blake, because this is a very big book, think you should read a lot of Blake, but the one in particular is The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, because what struck me about this is it was basically a mythic kind of poem about what is life, what's the point of life, and he's referencing the Bible, he's using all of these things, and then there's a section of it called the Proverbs of Hell. And it's meant to be intentionally inflammatory, and what it really does is it pits contradictions of the collective conscious and the sorts of ideas that we put forward about things, and it puts things that should be heretical but make so much sense. And it's really Blake spitting in the face of all the dogmatic people and all the people that are going to read his work and call him a heretic or such. And I think it's a really fun read. And overall, Blake's style of poetry in general is so unlike anything else you'll ever read. The man had a deep reverence for the Bible, but doesn't seem to really kind of stick to the traditional norms of things. And it's really inspiring to read his works. I really enjoy it. I think he's the closest thing to what I would want out of an author, what I would want out of a poet. And every line I read of Blake, I find myself just sitting there and saying, this is one of the most incredible things I've ever read. So I really recommend you read Blake. If you don't want to read something that's that in-depth, just pick up the Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience. That's a bonus recommendation for you guys. That's really the first thing you should read by him. But on to the next thing, and the hardest thing on this list. Here we go. Ulysses. Ulysses, I think Borges just described Ulysses perfectly when he said, Ulysses is a book that's admired more than read. Because what James Joyce did in this book was completely unlike anything else, and for good or bad, he made the most complex work of art that you've ever read or will read. And then he did it to another extent in Finnegan's Wake, but I have not read Finnegan's Wake yet, so I can't recommend it to you. Um, that's a whole nother thing. But basically, what Ulysses is it's a story about one man going throughout his day, and there's a certain event. I don't feel like getting into all the details or spoiling anything, but more or less, it's centered around a guy who he knows his wife is cheating on him, and he's going about his day trying to act normal and trying to just live his life. And what James Joyce hopes to capture is the everyday life of Dubliners and why it's almost more interesting than stories of great heroes, and how there's such beauty in mundaneness and how there's such beauty in everyday life. And he does a very good job of this because in every chapter he writes it in a different style. In every single sentence is a joke. In every single sentence something is spelled wrong, and really the only way to understand it is to read it out loud. But it's also a book that you need entire like encyclopedias to get every single reference and get every single aspect of it, and it's just something that you could reread your entire life and never get everything that he put in here. And I really can't speak about it enough. Joyce himself said that I wrote Ulysses so that for the next 100 years English professors would be debating every single line for 100 years. Like it's just it's to me one of the most interesting works that you'll ever read, and if you have the stomach for it, it's well worth reading. If you don't have the stomach for it, it's just interesting to learn about the story of Ulysses and understand about how complex it is. There were times I didn't understand a single thing of what I was reading. There were other times where I was like, this is tremendous, but it really does something to capture consciousness. It really does something to capture the way our brains work, and the way that we internalize things, and shifting perspectives, and how there's not such thing as a truly unbiased narrator, and can we even believe anything that's being said. And there's just so many things in this book that I think you can find little tidbits and you can find little enjoyment. And I feel like I've been going on for a very long time about Ulysses, so we'll get into the next book, but I highly recommend it if you have the patience. Next thing we have is the Red Book by Carl Gustav Jung, and to describe the Red Book, I think Jung described it best when he said, "To the outside observer, this might seem like madness, but to me, it was critical to all my success." And essentially, what Jung is saying is that these writings seem like schizophrenic rambling. They rival the person yelling on the sidewalk that the end is near. But really, throughout this book, Jung was confronting his own unconscious, and he was writing down his dreams and his visions and all of these symbols that were really plaguing him at the time. The book was written after him and Sigmund Freud had kind of split ways professionally, and really all his reputation was destroyed, and he had to build himself back up from nothing, and he was really going through it. And for 5 years he was kind of silently struggling and recording these visions in his journal and trying to analyze them, trying to understand them. And he credits this period in his life for being able to come to grips with himself, to be able to, as he describes, go to the depths of hell, to confront himself and bring the darkness into the light so that he could be whole. And it's incredibly fascinating. It's incredibly weird. There's parts of it that you're like, what am I reading? And then there's parts of it like, this is the most interesting thing that you will ever stumble upon. And it's so all over the place that like I had to include it on this list because, you know, you read Jung, you read like the what is it? What are the names? Psychology and Alchemy, or the Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious. I don't know why I couldn't think of the names, but like you read those books and those are like really professional. Those are really scientific. Those are really well done and very straightforward. But you can't say that about this book. And there's a reason that Jung didn't want this book to be published in his lifetime. It was actually published in like 2011, like 50 years after his death. Like whenever you're hearing that an author is having something published that long after their death, it's usually well worth reading because they weren't willing to take that reputation hit, and there's something very interesting in there. And I don't know, honestly, if you can read the Red Book and take anything away from it aside from this is weird, this is cool, I don't know where to go with this. I don't know what information to take away from it, but there's something in here, and it's just a cool thing to read. The last thing is Walden. This is a book that is as much philosophy as it is about how to grow potatoes, and I frankly just love it. Like that's the only way to put it. Like Walden is the only book that you can't really put into categories because is it a journal or is it a manual to live a great life? And I think that sets it apart from other philosophical books as it's not trying to make you do anything, it's just trying to tell you about the experience. And through this experience, you find a depth of life that is unlike anything else you will ever experience. And really, the book centers around Henry David Thoreau going out into the woods, living on Walden Pond, being inspired by Ralph Waldo Emerson, who lent him the land so that he could build a cabin, so that he could live in the woods, simplify his life, break his life down to the bare minimum so that he could find peace, so that he could find appreciation, so that in every moment he could be gracious for the little things that he had. He was gracious for the tools because they allowed him to, sow the fields. He was gracious for the wood and the lumber so that he could stay warm during the winter. Like all the little things that otherwise he would not be able to appreciate, otherwise not be able to, really understand, okay, this thing's keeping me alive. Okay, this thing's doing this for me. Like, you know what I mean? There's one really cheat code to happiness, and it's gratitude. It's being able to be gracious and be thankful and be very pleasant in spite of everything else going on around you. And yeah, I don't know if it quite fits the mold of all the other books on this list, but I felt the need to include it because it's very unique in how it's structured. It's very unique in how it's done, and there's a whole lot of life packed into these pages that I think are well worth you picking up. So here is the list. I did it differently, so maybe that helps, maybe that hurts. I don't know if you guys like to see him in the beginning and click maybe, oh, I want to hear what he has to say about this book, or you want the surprise, so we'll try this out. But if you guys want me to do it the other way, I can do it the other way too. I think there's pros and cons for both. But if you want to read my book, it's quite unlike anything else as well. It'll be the first thing in the description. It's really a collection of poems, a collection of aphorisms, a collection of short stories and short essays, and I think it gives you a lot of how I think, a lot of how I view the world, and I think at the very least it'll be interesting to you. Everyone that's read it has told me it's great, but it's all family members, so I want to hear from the real people, the people that have no investment in me. If you want to get the stuff I write on a daily basis, go ahead, join the school community. If not, and you just enjoy this video, thank you for being here. I love you guys so much. Thank you guys for all the support. It's been unreal. But with that said, that's all I got. So peace out.